where we're getting to know the faith and those who live it. I had to read the tagline because I don't know it yet. It's new. I am not Renee. She's out on business. I'm Casey. I work in communications, doing a lot of different things, editorial work, marketing, some other analytics, but neither here nor there. We're joined in studio today by my good friend, Phillip Eisenberg. Welcome, Phil.
Good to be here, Casey. Thank you.
One thing that you may not know about both of us is that we're both ex-seminarians. Both of us entered seminary at the same time, right out of high school, and both of us ended up discerning out, although Phil lasted
I went an
long.
extra year, I think, right?
Yes. Yes.
Another lap around.
Or another semester. Yeah, you went another year, I think.
2.5,
Anyway.
I'd say.
We'll get into that. So today we're going to be talking about, we hear a lot about like discernment stories into seminary and what it's like to discern the call before seminary and even in seminary, but nobody really talks about what happens when you discern out of seminary, which is a real, actually, if I'm not mistaken, the majority of men who enter seminary end up discerning out at some point. So I think it's important to touch on that and to maybe explore that topic a little bit more. There's a lot to be said about what seminary life does for a man, both while he's in it and especially afterwards, whether he becomes ordained a priest or whether he joins a lady and gets married or whatnot. So that's what we'll be talking about today. So first, I'm going to let Phillip introduce himself, and we'll go from there.
Sure. All right. Thanks, Casey. Phillip Eisenberg, controller for the Diocese of Sioux Falls. Financial controller, so I deal with finances a lot, and the bookkeeping we do for the different entities in the diocese, and also a heavy hand of that is parish accounting and giving them as much support as I can do.
Nice.
That's my day to day.
Nice. Phil's an expert at what he does. He's very good. So it's always a pleasure to talk to him about his job and to see him at work. So let's start here. Let's start, Phillip.
See.
Let's start going into seminary. So tell me a little bit about life, maybe just a tiny bit about how you discerned into seminary and then what it was like sort of entering in, maybe where you were at.
Yeah.
Like I said, we both entered seminary at the same time. So
Again, I feel like instinct is to say it's unusual, but I think it's actually quite common. A lot of men find that their kind of start or kind of interest in priesthood and that start of the discernment phase is just how close they are to the priests in their lives, the good men in the church. And that was really my entrance in, was kind of just the familiarity and friendships that I had built with the priests here at the cathedral. So that was, the first steps about thinking about seminary. And really when in kind of discussing what we would just talk about today, I think what's interesting is to think about is that was more than just me thinking about seminary and formation in the life of the priest, but it was the familiarity, the comfortability with just church and church life and kind of what that means, because it can be very overwhelming. I think the idea of like for religious, women and men who enter convents or any seminary, any movement like that can just be like overwhelming. But I think having had that history and time of just, you're just another guy. I mean, you're in a sense another guy that just loves Christ, loves the church, loves the mission in the church. To experience that and then to start considering a vocation just made it natural to be able to say, yeah, okay, like I'll do, if they accept me, there's an application process, but if they accept me, I felt again, and then through a lot of prayer, you feel a call. Yeah. So that process was just natural.
Sure.
And that was a good process.
You did a lot of, if I'm not mistaken, and this maybe touches on your being familiar with the church setting. You did a lot of work as an altar server and MC even before seminary.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to be said about altar serving, about being around the liturgy, and how that relates into discerning the call to the priesthood, or discerning at least a call into seminary.
Yep. It's, again, maybe a bit obvious, but if you're serving, you're pretty close to the priest, right? So you get that opportunity to, in most cases, our priests, God gives them many different gifts, but most of them are very familial guys. They're guys that just, they just so much joy in their hearts, especially the priests in our diocese. I think we are very gifted with our clergy here. And
I would echo that.
So just being a frequent server and pontifical, you're just, again, you get to know so many of them and they're working with the bishop. So then that kind of immediately draws you into the bigger picture than maybe just your local church. And that's why I've seen, I don't know the details of this, but it seems like we're bringing in more of our pontificals to be pontifical service from other parishes. They kind of bring them in a bit more now, which is such a cool thing to see.
Oh, yeah,
I love that.
Definitely. Let's jump into let's make it real. Let's jump into like the first week of seminary. So you've had, I think you went on at least a couple of visits or one visit. I went on only one, and I think you were along.
That's right. Fall of 05.
Right. I was the only non-O'Gorman guy, so if
like,
I remember right.
Who's this guy, Casey? From Volga, right?
Right, yeah. So first week of seminary. One thing about seminary life then, and I'm sure it's the same now, is it's very structured. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason for that. So tell me what it was like to jump into that structure, to experience probably that change from high school life into college, like a structured college life.
I would say it was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, was just to immediately get introduced to that structure and that kind of rigid form of, to say, this will be your life now while you're in seminary. And I say it was a good thing because we all come from different family backgrounds and whatnot. But for me, very loving parents, very structured home life. But as an only child, I didn't venture out a lot. I wasn't like the kid always going to summer camp, and I was pretty, just safeguarded, or I was at home a lot. So this was my first big, as a young person, step away. So I was going to create all that on my own, which if I hadn't been in seminary would have, who knows, we know that it's just such a good structure and formation that you get immersed into right away. Yeah. So I think that was just a blessing, but specifically the experience of that was, it was kind of jarring right away, but it was also what I think seminary, and our seminary at the time, did very well, is they don't make you feel like an island, like you're just a guy who's kind of, every guy right next to you is going right along with you and experiencing it. They, at least at the time, right, the seniors are there. They kind of help you get moved in and packed. They know the rhythm so well that you just follow along and you can kind of go with it well. And then they usually do the new men retreat, where Father, at the time, Father William Bear, gives kind of the structure and the overall vision that he has for your formation. And rigid, but it's sort of right. You jump into that topic for a second. Like, that is needed, right? Yeah. You need that rigidity of, I don't have to think about it in a certain sense. Like, I don't have to, I'm going to do this prayer at this time, and this, like, it's built for you so you can focus on your own spiritual growth, the discernment that you should be doing during the time of seminary, just being a man of Christ, a man in the church, and a man for others. Nice. See, I've got them both in now. So that, I don't know if that answered your question, but I'd say the rigidity, it can be jarring, but it's actually immediately comforting because you have that pattern and rhythm. I think we like that generally as people. Yeah,
and I'm going to expand on that just a little bit. Father Klein was on another podcast a while back, and he said that when he went into seminary, there's so many different personalities there. I mean, every personality you can imagine. And in any other environment, that would be a difficult place to enter. When you have that many different personalities, it would get cliquey. Mm-hmm. It would get, it just wouldn't tend to be a warm environment. But what brings everybody together in seminary is their belief in Christ and their desire to be there. And that makes that structure and rigidity, just like what you said, it makes it warm. Mm-hmm. It makes it wholesome for you. And so I think that's a big part of that. A similar thing probably happens in the military. You're there for a purpose, although I really feel that seminary life is even far deeper than that, just because of the belief in Christ and whatnot. So any memorable moments while we're in the middle of seminary now?
Well, I was just going to say, just you're talking through it, but let's maybe talk about a specific, like, even if maybe the guy next to you is definitely not your favorite, at a certain point of the year, you guys are going through the same things together. Like, we did like a 40-hour food fast, right? Yes. Sometimes it's getting foggy because sadly it's been a few years, but that was rough. I remember really hungry, you're like, okay, does a smoothie count? You're kind of start, right. But you're just, because you're so close to one another, I think it's easy to, even in those moments, you can just relate, so
everybody's going through the same thing. Yeah. If one guy can do it, I can do it, and there's support there. So it's like, I agree with that. So,
I mean, we could talk the whole time about this, but memorable moments, like our mission trip The new men always go on mission trip,
Yes.
or typically go on mission trip, and we went down to Bay St. Louis and New
Yeah.
Orleans,
Yeah.
and it was
That was
wonderful.
quite a time. That was a long road trip. I remember the bus. It was like, oh, and we got to some house and sleeping on the floor was just like, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
a
that
fun
was
time.
a long trip, and yeah, it's an interesting experience. Anytime you go anywhere with a group of seminarians, that might be something that if someone's seen it, it just kind of gets formed in your mind, because it's like you're a very irregular, uncommon group,
Yes.
because you all dress the same,
Yep.
you know, and let's just call it walking through the
Yep.
French Quarters.
Yep.
You stand out
Down
and-
Bourbon Street.
down Bourbon Street, you know, and
Get
that
yelled
was.
But it's a win. I mean, it felt because we're all together doing the same thing. It really felt like a good camaraderie and a good witness. It strengthens each individual in the communal whole. Strengthens them in Christ. Whereas things that they may have been timid to do before,
Yeah.
now they have some courage to do, and that's what builds you
Yeah.
as a man.
I love the humanity of it, because I think we're all laughing their joke. We could see it happening, but it's like in the moment, because there's just many unsavory things in that specific
Right.
spot that we just happen to need to walk past. And
Right.
so but yeah, you have that camaraderie, that fraternity of just saying, man, that's such a different life's pursuit. And
Yes.
here we are, a uniform kind of collection of men to focus on this. How great. Like that's.
Definitely. So we get through the first year. You go into summer. For you, was there any, summer is sort of, for me, I guess, personally, when I was in there, summer was a time when I exited that structure, and there wasn't, nowadays they have, there's a lot more structure, I think, involved in like seminary and life around the summer, the propedeutic house. I think the guys lived together, but at that time that wasn't necessarily the case. You generally went home to your own parish, worked at your own parish, or somewhere in the diocese. What was that experience like for you? Was there a desire to, was there any desire to sort of?
Yeah. Looking back, I can see now for sure the increased focus on keeping that structure.
Yeah.
At the time, guys talked about it, and now you can see like, man, you need that structure, because those are those times when it's just easy to fall out of the pattern and habit. And on one side, that's what keeps you spiritually growing, of course, is you want to build up that's just building up your faith life. But then we just know Satan's always prowling, especially on young men, discerning this vocation and pursuing Christ. So it's just more opportunity for that. And so at the time, I mean, I had a great summer, spent it in a parish, and got to experience the life of that parish and kind of see really day to day what parish life was like. And that was really a gift, which the flexibility of that also was nice, because it allowed me to like still be on the kind of the youth side of things and do the decamps and all that fun stuff, and made a lot of lifelong friends. And I'll do a quick shout out. Technically, at the time, I met many good friends from the Aberdeen area, but those connections, and then later obviously discerning out, but my future wife, or my wife now, was there at the time. So
Oh,
it's
really?
kind of funny how those things happen, you know.
Awesome. Yeah, the maintaining the structure in the summer was difficult for me to do that. So I experienced life in my own parish, and I think maybe looking back in hindsight, going to maybe a different parish somewhere else, maybe that structure
Yeah.
would have remained a little bit more. But when you're home
Yeah.
and hometown,
And if you would have
whatnot,
had a seminary brother with you, I think too, right?
Yes.
That even two, right?
Accountability,
They sent
right.
them out two
Yep,
by two,
yep.
because that helps keep each other accountable. And even for myself, right? So I was just a seminarian in this
Yeah.
parish, and there were many times where it's like I'm just not in that group or that space that I had been used to for the last year. So I can see that now, what a gift it is, and why again it's important for men to stay in that.
Nice. Let's jump in about halfway through. Let's jump into the next year and sort of that process of discerning out. Maybe give me an idea of like when you first sort of felt the call maybe to leave, and what that felt like, and how you discerned that.
I would say it's not, and I do numbers now. It wasn't that it had to be numbers then, but someone said, really that first year, don't even focus on your discernment. Focus on just living the life, and among hopefully other good things, but that really resonated with me. And so I know that first year I didn't even really think about it. So at the second year, you sort of start to get into that mode of really discernment. What is God calling me to? And I would say for me at the time, it was it's actually kind of hard now that, it's to actually think like, what was that singular moment? For me, so then I'd say it was a collective. It's a collective over that second year where I kind of started to have those feelings of just, was this what God was calling me to? Obviously there's great Catholic women that, just meet and like doing these things. And so you're like, wow, what a great example. And so it's like, was God calling me to that? Or, am I really receiving and being fed by what I'm doing here in the seminary and ministering in the church? And I don't want to get too far ahead in our conversation, but I think that's where, if anything, I had that consolation, right? A lot of times we talk the desolation and consolation, and the consolation I had was, it just was such a confirmation that if I left, I wanted to work for the church. Okay. So I think what was kind of underpinning everything was God called me to that time in seminary to be in formation, but that at least in my own heart, it was like, but I've called you to be on mission in the church, not necessarily as a priest. And so that second year, and then that half of a third year that I was just a confirmation of that, was taking that time to think about it, pray about it. And yeah.
I want to go back to something you said, because Father Kapperman often talks about, when he talks about discernment, excuse me, he talks about the feeling of peace when you think about the decisions you have to make. Where is that peace? And it seems like when you we're talking about, the thoughts of working for the church, of being out as a lady, and it seems like there was a peace that kind of came over you.
Yep.
Yeah, that's an important concept in discernment. I love it when he talks about that, and he goes through some great examples of like what that looks like. So let's jump into the time that you discerned out,
okay.
and then life afterwards, because I really want to get to that, especially the impact that, looking back in hindsight, what was the impact that seminary life had on you. So let's jump into, you've decided to leave. Just real quick, what was it like to leave? Was it tough? Was it?
Yeah, it's definitely tough. I think that's something where in the moment it feels like such a life alter, because I mean you're now exiting a very specific path of formation. But again, I think once you mentally and in your heart, make that decision, hopefully for all men and women that do, like, you have that peace then. But scary still. I was sharing with you, right? So usually at the semester break, and I would assume at year end, like there's always if it's a senior, where they go into seminary, or if those who have discerned out, kind of like what's their plan. And I remember, I didn't, of course, look up the quotes. I'll probably butcher it, but where we happened to be was near the crucifix that's still at St. John Vianney. It's that kind of golden looking, that's on the outside. I don't know where it is specifically now, but there's the quote about the house that's built on rock, like, will fear neither wind, nor rain, nor storm. Like, it will stand firm. And the whole point being, if it's founded on Christ, founded in the church, that you will not falter. And I remember referencing that, because it's like, it was like on the walk, or just as we were going to this final meeting of and I remember sharing that, and it just, that felt like such a great summary of that moment.
Yeah. Life afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked a little bit about leaving the structure or the summer. Just concretely, where did you end up going? Mm-hmm. And then how did that life from seminary impact that journey that you took?
So again, kind of based on that discernment. So I was like, I still want to work for the church. So I just stayed right at St. Thomas. We were at St. John Vianney. I think we mentioned that. But so really for me, it was just moving dorms, right? In a certain sense, the seminary is a glorified dorm.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I stayed there. And the experience of that, though, is man, that's such an experience too. You don't really realize what a safeguard, in a sense, the seminary is, what a mother the seminary is to those men in formation, because just immediately you're kind of thrown out into the real world, and that can be anything in life, but this is a unique calling, because immediately you were kind of made the military reference, right? So it's one to be in a something that's really forming you and calling you to a higher, but when it also involves a very spiritual aspect in your faith life, you're kind of both, right? You can kind of be really shaken by that. But being at St. Thomas, already had the friends, and they have a wonderful Catholic studies program there, and there was just so many good things happening in the ways in which those seminaries are involved in the communities. So my own personal life, yes, that was something that was difficult, but at least for me, having made the decision to continue my degree path, which was going to lead me to church work, and that was kind of my intention. staying there was also easy because of those ancillary connections that the seminary has. And so it was just like, man, I'm going to stay. I have all these friends. And again, like I get a lot of new friends because the seminarians have a very specific lifestyle. So I didn't like have the opportunity to really, which is good. It's good to have that separation. But it's just something that if you enter in and if God does call you out, that's just a unique trial that you have to offer up is to kind of come back in. But then hopefully, it's not fearing to be a witness, because I think that was something now as I look back, it's just coming to my mind is I'm sure it's so easy in many conversations just to kind of forget the time in seminary. We both, I think, as men who've been in now married, we talk so much, or we are very much living out the formation we got. But in those first moments afterwards, it can sort of feel like you just kind of took off a coat or something. But I think immediately having the courage to not be afraid of kind of where you've been and what you've done, and to really immediately leverage that as a previous identity of who you are, can just be a powerful thing, like a good witness, right? To speak good words of that.
Yeah, you mentioned we're both married, we both have kids. How has that, excuse me, how's the family lifestyle, having a wife and a child, what can you look back on in your seminary formation that really has impacted that and helped you to be a better husband and a better dad?
Yep. I got a lot of growing to do. Let's get that out of the way, right? Like we can always be better husbands and fathers. Yeah. But with everything, it's your vision and focus. I think having spent time in seminary, and if you were at least attentive to the majority of the time there, that formation just keys you into obviously what matters in life. And if we're men leading our families, assisting our wives, like we know that it's towards Christ, but it's also kind of within a wider framework. And that's where I've already referenced the men in Christ, men of church, men for others. You have to be aware of, okay, so my family, it's my goal to assist them on their way to heaven and bring them to Christ. And so there's just a lot that I think, like, you've been given many gifts, so let's use them. But it's probably more than anything, and other good examples, but it is knowing the importance of that, I won't say schedule, but just knowing that everything matters, knowing that having a rhythm and a pattern, and knowing that the sacraments matter, right? Like anyone would go to confession a lot. So knowing that has a key place in our family, and being apologetic to one another if we mess up. We hopefully there's not we're not hiding anything from each other. You go through it. I remember part of the initial kind of discussions that Father Bear or just the talks he would give us was, they always talked about being able to be molded, essentially. It's probably more eloquent because he was a gifted speaker.
Oh, yes.
Go look up his homilies. He's so good. But I think in that same way, like, we're still called to be refined and to kind of be molded into who God wants us to be. And so just bringing that openness and that self-sacrificing is what we need to be. And again, I know you can always grow in that, but that's where my heart and mind just go when I think back to really how is that influencing, hopefully just daily, the example I try to set for my son. And I'll definitely say, I know this is a direct quote from Father Bear, but he always said that for those men who leave, and he would talk about never be afraid to show yourself in prayer amongst your family, but specifically your young kids, because children always emulate kind of what they see, right? And so that is just a powerful image that he gave me that now it just comes to mind. Something I need to do more is just to be not afraid to just maybe kneel down and pray at certain times. And so, Daddy, it's like, I'm just praying, buddy, Right. And so I think that's a powerful, just a singular moment, but I think that very cool, how those two can connect.
Awesome, Phillip. I've enjoyed this conversation, your insights.
Yeah.
I can't say how much I enjoy talking with you about this, and we could talk for 3 hours.
I was just going to say, we could probably talk for quite a while.
So it's been a pleasure, Phil.
Yeah.
Just a reminder to listeners and viewers out there, November 5th coming up, Tuesday. If you haven't voted, make sure you go out and vote. Vote no on Amendment G, a radical abortion amendment. And then also on IM29, that's legalization of recreational marijuana. The bishops have asked us to vote no on that for good reason. So just a reminder to vote. That's it for today. Please join us again next time for more Catholic Views.